Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning into the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
How are you, Dr. Paul?
I'm doing well, but I want to talk about a subject which is not much fun, and I wish we could just forget about them. But I do want to make a few comments and have you comment on that terrible tragedy in Florida. Yeah. I mean, the killing of 17 kids. How can anything be more tragic than that? And everybody are wringing their hands, and you know, the left has come out immediately. Well, it's all the guns. Get more guns off the street, more gun regulations. That'll solve the problem. Others will say, well, you should have guns in places, and the solution is that teachers have guns. I'm not so sure that is a simple answer whatsoever, because if you had a private school, the school would decide, you know, the safety issues and how you handle guns. But nevertheless, it is an utter tragedy. And the reason that we've suggested that we talk a little bit about the FBI is there's some type of evidence that they were fully warned, which is not something brand new, because I might mention later on the different times the FBI should have been involved and they fall flat. And of course, we read about the FBI all the time right now. And what are they doing? They're in Russiagate and they're testifying who's lying on this. It's all politics. And it looks like sometimes they're not doing the job that they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, that's certainly the case. And obviously, it's impossible for them to get every lead down. But there was something that came out. A gentleman, Ben Benight, on his YouTube page, he noticed a crazy comment. I'm going to be a professional school shooter, from someone called Nicholas Cruz, which is the name of the person who shot up the school. And he sent this to the FBI tips email, and the FBI did contact him. They didn't just completely drop the ball. They contacted
the person that gave the release. Yeah, right.
He sent it and asked if he knows this guy, knows anything about him. He said, no, I'm just passing this on. So we don't know what happened. We don't know the entire story. Yet we still can talk about how they do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing.
And they fall, some of their, some of their information gets falls through the track, and they don't follow up on it. But here's a guy, I mean, he was waving a lot of flags. Yeah. I mean, he was in a tough home situation. His parents had recently died. He's been in school. He's a troublemaker. He was suspended, and then he was expelled. And people knew that he really had, a lot of problems. And now we read, which always seem to come up, and I especially pay attention to this. I don't know the details, but he was getting mental health treatment. And a big question is he on, or has he been on psychotropic drugs? And so often this is the case. Those drugs can do the reverse. Instead of calming somebody down, they can turn them into suicidal individuals and also violent people. Now, that's not my opinion of what happened, but boy, that raises questions, because a lonely kid, no family, and having all these problems. Somebody said, well, we'll get you some help. Maybe medication will take care of you. Well, I have a strong disbelief that those medications are very, very helpful. Maybe rarely so, but I just am not very trusting of those medications.
That does seem to be a common denominator in the mass shootings, and maybe it's just circumstantial, but it certainly does. But yeah, there are a lot of red flags. I mean, he apparently, according to press reports, he would post things on social media like, quote, I want to shoot people with my AR-15, which is what he did. So that's kind of gives an indication that it shouldn't have been a real shock that the guy was doing this.
It doesn't seem strange, at least it does to me, thinking of a kid that's walking, a 19-year-old kid, man, that was known on the campus, known to be a troublemaker, walks in with a rifle and not be noticed and get away with all this. I just don't understand how those kind of things happen, but it surely did, and there is the tragedy. But my beef is that I've never had much confidence in the FBI. I mean, they've had a good reputation, but over the years, they haven't really done their job. They're usually spying on Americans, and from the very beginning, they've been doing they spy on people and use for political reasons. How about just recently? What has the FBI been doing? You see them on TV. They're involved in Russiagate and all these investigations, and they're proven to be liars at times and mischief. They're doing that and not following up with a lead like this. That seems to be a problem. But just think in our recent history, we have this tragedy at Ruby Ridge. The FBI was involved there. Nobody was punished. Even in 9/11, oh no, don't get into this conspiracy stuff. And I don't even have to. All you have to do is say, what about the FBI agent that knew something and I think reported, if I'm not mistaken, like into the 20s, like 25 times or so, tried to report to his the higher officials about people training to fly airplanes but not land them. They didn't do anything. So is this total ineptness or what's going on here? But I would think also if you had the FBI doing the job they're supposed to be doing, maybe they should have been involved in telling us what was going on at the Davidian compound rather than just murdering those kids. You know? So to me, I think they have a lousy reputation. And yet, most of the time, especially from the conservative wing of the political spectrum, they say, this is true, what you're saying, Ron, there is a problem, we need to clean it up, but that's just a few people. I think it's a culture, I think it's a job that was never meant to be, it wasn't established in the Constitution, and they're not doing the job, but people are dependent on it. I'll call, what did this young man do? He sees this guy writing about killing people. Call the FBI. Call the FBI, and they'll take care of us. But I would think people eventually will lose confidence in the FBI to solve these problems. But I think it's so sad because it isn't easy. It isn't some of the foreign policy problems that we deal with. I think the solution is much easier, you know, just get out of the way and mind our own business. But this is a little more complicated. But if you think in terms of privacy, private property, private schools, homeschooling, you don't have these kind of problems. I mean, it's in the government atmosphere of schools, but that sounds like a blanket accusation, which I don't mean it to be, but I do know the environment there seems to be different than if you have a private school. You have less drugs and less violence, but I would say that it's still possible because people do have mental problems and they do get on these drugs and everybody is vulnerable. But there sure is almost like getting to be an epidemic. It used to be, oh, this is an isolated incident, but this is getting a little bit too common to just say it's isolated. So there's something terribly wrong with our culture if this continues to go on or increase in frequency.
And, you know, we understand that it's not a perfect world, you know, but it is a matter of priorities, like you say, with the FBI. The other thing that they're involved in is, you know, half the time that they make a big terrorist arrest, they've been motivating this terrorist, they've been, you know, colluding with this potential terrorist. Usually it's a loner or a loser that they hook up with and say, hey, don't you want to bomb something? Don't you want to bomb something? So they get involved with this too. So it's an issue of priorities. And I think we would argue that their priorities right now seem a little bit screwy.
Yeah, and I think the thing you mentioned there about how they get involved and deal with people, and that is the principle of entrapment. And our government does it all the time, and they should never be allowed to break the law to try to get somebody else to break the law so that they can, you know, take him in and arrest him. But this is not a simple matter. I think just any decent person would feel, you know, such a tragic, be so tragically disappointed with what's happened with his needless death. But there has to be something good that can come from this and a better understanding of how to handle problems with this, and hopefully someday we can contribute to that. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.